in the virtual room. Welcome, welcome. Some of you have your cameras on, which is great. It's nice. Oh, I see someone holding the book already. I like that. Oh my gosh, look. That's so cool. Great. Right. Just letting everyone in. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of people. Yes, I loved everyone showing the book. That's awesome. There are a lot of you tonight, so it's just taken a few minutes to let everyone in. Great. So totally fine for you to have your cameras on tonight. I just want to let you know that we are recording, and we do archive our program recordings on the website. So, you know, just making sure that you're comfortable with that, because you will inevitably end up in the recording at some point. We do have the chat publicly disabled for this evening. We just want to listen this evening to Laurie and Helen. I know some of you sent in questions ahead of time, which Helen has for Laurie, which we really appreciate. And you are all muted, which of course is just, you know, protocol, especially when we have this many people in an event. So again, we just, you know, appreciate everyone just joining us and listening. Okay, I think almost everyone is in. So welcome again. It is great to have everyone here. My name is Sari Kamen. I am the Public Programs Director of MOFAD. Some of you have been with us before. For some of you, this is the first time. So for those of you who have been coming to our programs now virtually, welcome. Welcome back, I should say. And for those of you coming for the first time, welcome. This is such a really special event for us. And I'm sure most of us are here tonight because Anthony Bourdain inspired you or helped maybe shape the way you think about the world. And like me, you just really miss him. So I really, really want to thank Laurie Woolever for giving MOFAD the opportunity to host this conversation, and congratulate her and the crew at Echo for hitting #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is so incredible. And I want to thank our friends at Kitchen Arts and Letters, who have been working so hard to ship out all of your books. And if you didn't get a chance to order a signed copy of the book, I will make sure to send you all the link tomorrow, so you can buy it online directly from them. Again, we are the Museum of Food and Drink, and your support means so much to us during this time. Just, you know, growing our virtual community through the past year has been, you know, the most beautiful silver lining of the pandemic. And like I said, we're in New York City, and we've been able to sustain our organization because of these programs and your support. So I just wanted to mention that next week we are having a little membership drive that's lasting for 5 days. It starts on Monday, and that is actually the 1-year anniversary of our online programming. Each day, new members will receive a special perk from our food and drink community. So please make sure to follow us on social media, and you can join our newsletter to find out all about those perks. Now I want to introduce you to the incredible Helen Rosner, who is going to lead tonight's conversation. Helen, you probably know, is a staff writer at The New Yorker. She covers all things gastronomic. She's been covering food for more than a decade as a writer and an editor, and she won a James Beard Award in 2016 for her ode to chicken tenders in Guernica. Helen, thank you so, so much for being with us tonight. Take it away and enjoy the program, everyone.
Thanks, Sari. I'm so excited to be here with my copy of the book, which I also have from Kitchen Arts and Letters, the greatest bookstore. And I'm so excited to be on your screens tonight with Laurie Woolever. Laurie, who I imagine most of you know pretty well, at the very least from reading through this book and from all of her work, is a writer and an editor who for nearly a decade worked as lieutenant to Anthony Bourdain, working really closely with him on all sorts of projects, including co-authoring the wonderful cookbook Appetites, and co-authoring in an interesting way that we will talk about tonight, the book that we're here to celebrate, World Travel by Anthony Bourdain and Laurie Woolever. Laurie has written for a ton of publications. You've probably read her work if you read food media at all, in Saveur, in Roads and Kingdoms, in GQ, in Food and Wine, in Lucky Peach, RIP, and has pretty much done everything, knows everyone, and is really cool about all of it. Laurie is also the co-host of one of my very, very favorite podcasts, Carb Face, which I hope we get the chance to talk about a little bit tonight. If you all are not huge Carb Face fans, I highly, highly recommend that you find that wherever fine podcasts can be found. It's a pretty great one. Laurie, thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Helen. That's a hell of an introduction. I will try and live up to it.
You don't have to if you don't want to. We can just chill.
Like, sit back and let you do all the work.
We can just hang out and have a bunch of people watch us. A quick sort of heads up for everybody about how the evening is going to go. Like Sari said, in terms of questions from the audience, Q&A stuff was sent in earlier. A whole bunch of you sent in amazing questions. So Laurie and I are going to chat in a pretty conversational, free-flowing kind of way for about 45 minutes or so. And then I have a sort of curated list of some of the questions that folks sent in, and we'll turn to those for the very end of the program. And we'll be here for about an hour, maybe a little less. I think we're supposed to wrap up at about 9 o'clock East Coast time. So if you're trying to plan your bathroom breaks or running to get a glass of water, that's when we're gonna all probably be
sitting. I talked a lot, so you can go over 5 minutes.
I feel like Laurie and I could probably fill several hours, but we'll try to stick to one.
At the same time, I meandered.
Great, so, you know, I'm not sure, there are a lot of you here, and I don't want to assume that everybody has a copy of the book necessarily in front of them or that you've had a chance to crack it yet. But if you haven't yet taken a look at World Travel, it's a really fascinating book as a book. So like, obviously it is a physical object and it has a cover and it has pages, and I'm hoping that holding this up to the camera is going to work. Because Laurie worked on this project after Tony's death, it's a sort of a duet of both of their voices. I'm trying to make the camera focus. So we have sort of Tony's words in blue and bold, and we have Laurie's words in black. And at first I was thinking of this as a dialogue, and then I realized it's not a dialogue, it's a duet. It's the two of you merging together these opinions and perspectives and voices and narratives. And on a purely like almost metatextual postmodern level, it's an extraordinary undertaking. And, you know, putting together a posthumous volume like this, I imagine was not easy at times, and at other times was probably surprisingly beautiful and joyous. But I'd love to know about the process of finding the quotes, finding the dialogue, finding the lines that came together in this duet. Mm-hmm. Was it obvious right away?
Not at all, no. Because there was a period of time where Tony and I were working on it together. It was a short period of time, much shorter than, of course, I could have ever anticipated. But we wrote the proposal in March of 2017. And then because of schedules and publishing and contracts and everything, we really didn't get going on it in a real way until the spring of 2018, when I write about this in the introduction. We had one grand and glorious sit down in his apartment where I had come in with my research of having listed every place that he had ever visited for television, in some cases just places that he'd gone, that he'd written about. And we went through the list and decided which ones would be and which ones maybe would not be in the book. And it wasn't really a clear-cut case of, I like this place, I don't like this place. In some cases it was, this is just not, this is a great place, but there isn't really enough that's accessible to the public, or you know, politically it's incredibly dicey right now, and you know, nobody in the Western Hemisphere is going there, or you know, whatever the case was, or just any number of factors went into deciding which 43 countries would be represented in the book. And then in many cases, Tony had a very clear idea of what specifics would be included. He had such a great memory, and he would say, you know, make sure we use this bar and that guy with the sausages and this restaurant, and talk to this chef. And he had a lot of detail ready at hand without looking at notes or without going back to any of the source material. So I was really grateful for that meeting, which was not easy to get. Tony was a very busy guy. He was traveling a ton. He was finishing up a very busy season of making television, and I've always felt lucky to get an hour of his time. And I taped that conversation. I had it transcribed and started to pull things from the archive to start to put this thing together. And it was very slow at first, and I was still working as his assistant. I had my own writing projects going on. And so I wasn't too far along in it. And then he died in June of 2018. And I was sort of left with, well, what do we do now? And that was the question that a lot of us were asking that worked with and for him on television, on publishing projects, on any number of endeavors that he had going on. There was a lot of sort of, what do we do? This Tony was our organizing principle. And so how do we continue with some of these things that we've already invested our time and energy on that really ought to see the light of day? And it took a few months of processing and of kind of not doing anything and having tough conversations and trying to figure out what made sense. And also asking ourselves sometimes, what do we think Tony would want? And that's almost an impossible to answer question, but you do what you can. So, after some introspection and some conversations, we decided to go ahead with it. I made a sample chapter with material that I pulled from, it was the Paris chapter, was the first chapter that I wrote. And I had all the transcripts from 0.0, his television production company, of all the shows. And he had written extensively about Paris. And, he was just sort of on record as being somebody who was deeply influenced by Paris, went there as a child with his family, famously wrote about it in Kitchen Confidential. So there was a lot of material there. It was a really good sample chapter to see, well, let's see if we can do this. And he had such a storyteller's way of speaking and such a storyteller's way of writing. It was all kind of a piece and very, very natural, whether it was on the page or something he was saying off the cuff on camera or something that he wrote as a voiceover to add into a show at a later date. And so as much as there was a good 20-year span of material, there was a real consistency in the way that he was expressing himself that made this book possible. Because whether he loved something or hated it or had sort of an opinion that changed from the beginning to the end of the sentence, there was a consistent, very strong and clear voice that really, that established him from the get-go as somebody that people wanted to hear more from.
Revisiting just sort of the entirety of his work like that, did you come across anything that surprised you or that you had forgotten about or that sort of made you reconsider things you thought were sacred or written in stone?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I just, working with Tony, sort of living day to day as his assistant, being very, very immersed in his work. And as I said earlier, it was kind of an organizing principle for me and for some of the other people that worked with him. It almost became room tone, his shtick and the things that he said and his style and his rhythm. And it was just sort of the everyday sort of music of the day. To go back once he was gone and to recognize that this is the entirety. This is now a finite amount of work that this person has done. There's something about just seeing it in that way that you see it with fresh eyes when you realize like this is it. This is all we have. And I think sometimes there were jokes that maybe weren't jokes, or there was anger that actually was masking love, or there was so much. He was a complex guy, and he was a very open person. He told so much of his story, first in Kitchen Confidential, but he was telling his story in his mystery, murder novels. And he was, of course, telling his own story all the time when he was on the road, as much as he was telling other people's stories. But he's also a very private person. So, I think there are probably a lot of amateur Bourdain scholars that could read into the cryptic musings about a sausage or a hotel or a cafe. There's probably a lot to mine there. You know, I think for years people will take what they want to and take what they need from the things that he said.
Yeah, that whole public private tension is something that I always found so humanizing about him, that he had such a sort of public discomfort with his publicness.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, you know, being so on the inside and sort of, you know, I know you didn't travel with him constantly, but, you know, occasionally you would travel with him. And I'm curious what the experience has been like, sort of from your perspective, to see like the trip in first person, right? To travel with him, and then to see the way that those travels translate into the media that he would create, the writing, the TV shows. And then on top of it, now this third level of this sort of retrospective compilation of taking those trips.
Mm-hmm. The first shoot I ever did with Tony was in New York, actually. It was in 2010. It was a holiday special, and he asked me to come and help out with the food styling. So it was, we made a huge pile of pot au feu, and there was marrow bones with, you know, the famous dish from St. John in London, the roasted marrow bones with the parsley salad and toast. And a lot of very hearty, there was like veal tongue. And, you know, I didn't know, I hadn't been on a shoot before. And I think I was completely informed by what I had seen on television. So I assumed that Tony was going to sit down and eat a great big plate of food and hang out, and that it was going to be this truly like a big Christmas party. It was I'll say it was in July. It was like a 110-degree day in Manhattan. And we were making all this like super rich, heavy, beefy food. And it, you know, it was truly seeing how the sausage is made, you know. And he had a good time, but there was a sense of purpose and a sense of let's keep it moving, that I was surprised by, that I just, as a newcomer and as a kind of a novice to the whole thing, that was surprising to me. The first time I went on the road with him was in 2014. I went to central Vietnam, to the city of Hue. And what I saw there was someone who maybe had started to express cynicism on camera. He had just done a couple seasons of The Layover, which was the most kind of service-oriented travel show that he ever did, and he openly chafed against the confines of that show, and, you know, sort of openly ridiculed the travel book cliche, and you know, kind of he did it, you know, he was a go along to get along guy, but he was going to let you know that he thought it was kind of bullshit in the same way. So that was the Tony that I was sort of expecting to see in Vietnam, because he had, you know, he'd been doing this for a long time now, and so then to get to Vietnam and see him actually completely wide-eyed. And I knew that this, you know, Vietnam obviously was a place that he loved very much. Years and years before he ever set foot there, he had done extensive reading and research on Vietnam. He was a real student of Southeast Asia and the US involvement there, and you know, 20th century history. He was a huge fan of Graham Greene. And so from the first time he went to Vietnam, he came with this passion and this knowledge, and he wrote, you know, very effusively about this was a place that kind of blew his mind open. I think it was the second country he went to as a travel host. The first was Japan, although he had been to Japan before, and then Vietnam. And I think that was the point where he realized there was no going back to his old life as a restaurant cook, that whatever lay ahead, it was more of this, you know, incense and smoke and motorcycle fumes and jasmine and all, you know, all of these scents and these sounds and things that really just kind of changed him as a person. So it was really special to get to go to Vietnam with him. And he had never been to Hue. None of the crew had ever been to Hue. They'd always gone to Hanoi or Saigon, or they went up into the mountains of Dalat. They went to the islands, but they had never been to this part of the country. And so to see him, this person that I had come to know as a very cynical soul, just so happy, so just open to the experience, and and very much willing to extend a hand to me. You know, I hadn't ever been on the ground in Asia before. I hadn't really been traveling that much. I had a young son. I think he was 4 or 5 at the time. And so I was a little nervous about being so far away for so long. I think it was almost a 2-week trip. And Tony said, well, I always get a motorcycle whenever we come here. And it's for my own use. Sometimes they shoot me riding it, but anytime that they're not shooting me for the show, you should ride along with me. We'll get you a helmet. I think you knew I was a little bit nervous, so you sort of told me how to like hold on to the sides and lean this way. And, you're only going, at most maybe 25 miles an hour, but this was all very new to me. And that he had this willingness, despite his sort of road weariness at that point, to kind of help me along and help me see how great it was. I mean, I'm sure some people in the audience have been to Vietnam. It's hard to cross the road. If you're not familiar with that, the way things are there. I mean, it's not New York City with crosswalks and lights and sort of a general, it's chaos in New York, but it's not like Vietnam, which is like a ballet, that you have to submit to and just have a lot of faith that if you cross the road, you're not going to be hit, because no one is stopping at regular intervals. So all of that, and to see Tony so happy to be back in this place, and truly relaxed, enjoying the soup at the breakfast buffet, and all of that was really tremendous, and that was surprising to me, I guess. That was the beginning of a learning curve for me about how these places impacted him as just a person in the world.
Do you feel like, well, would you watch the shows afterwards? I mean, did you feel like you could see the threads between sort of, right, the camera magic and the reality behind it?
I got so caught up in my reverie. I'm like, what was the question?
No, it was a great story.
Yeah.
That line of like, Vietnam is a ballet you must submit to. I hope someone's writing that down.
Yeah, it was so interesting to be on set in some cases, but to be hiding. I wasn't allowed to be just part of a crowd scene, because looking the way I look, clearly not somebody who is a native of Hue. And here comes my cat down the hallway. So one of the most stunning things to me was how boring at times it could be. Like there was I didn't know any better. I was like, I'll go everywhere with the crew. I want to see everything. And they're like, are you sure? I think it was a day before Tony arrived. We all got there early, and they're like, we're going to go shoot B-roll. And I was like, that's great. And I didn't really understand that it was going to be like 7 hours of watching a woman paint, and it's like, thank God I had a huge book with me, so there is a lot of hurry up and wait with these things. And a lot of, there's this incredible craftsmanship and this incredible dedication. There's a reason why they're shooting somebody painting for 7 hours, so they can get, 15 seconds of a beautiful, evocative shot that lines up perfectly with the music and moves the story forward. And just the logistics, all of this setup. And this, I'm sure, again, there's people in the audience for whom this is not a surprise, but for me, it was all new, just to see, the hours in advance and the careful planning and the careful sort of moving of people around to create what appears always to be an incredibly spontaneous situation. And they were very careful to keep it spontaneous for Tony. I mean, he was often kept in the dark about details of things, and he wasn't meeting the people he was going to meet on camera. He wasn't meeting them ahead of time. There was a lot of work that went into keeping things truly authentic and truly, spontaneous for him, so that he didn't have to feel like he was acting the role of television host, but that he was truly experiencing something and getting the information that he could use to tell a story.
One of my very, very favorite words is this Italian term Spritzer, which is the literal definition is sort of like sprightliness, but kind of holistically it means putting a tremendous amount of effort into making things effortless, which I think is in many ways, I mean, I think it's the key to everything in a lot of ways, but so much the key to travel. I mean, what you're describing, for anyone who's been on a TV set, you know that there are these extraordinarily boring moments, but I think even if you've never been on a TV set, that's what it is like to travel. Like, you do have these moments of extraordinary magic, right? Connection or awakening. And they're usually surrounded by hours of like, okay, I guess we're here, or we're on a bus now. And sometimes there are little things of wonder that keep you focused. But I don't know, that is true to life. I guess just on TV, they distill it down to the very best moments.
Right. Because you don't want to watch somebody paint for 7 hours or whatever it is, or watch somebody fly in an airplane for 12 hours. I mean, it's yeah, like you're saying, it's very true to the travel experience. I mean, not if every moment of travel was beautiful and special and you're discovering the perfect hidden noodle soup and, you're whatever, kissing your new lover at midnight in the piazza. Like if your travel is all that, then nothing's special. It's like, if God is dead, everything is permitted. Of course. Am I using my thought philosophy a little bit?
No, you turn out all of your synapses, you just like an absolute dopamine overload, and like an hour and a half, you'd just be like, I want to sit in an empty room and eat plain spaghetti.
Right. And he was also very, I mean, that's the thing too. And I touch on that, and Tony touches on that in the Paris chapter, that it doesn't always have to be, La Tour Eiffel and the Mona Lisa and, everything, all of the cliches. You don't have to run yourself ragged having even the same experiences that Tony had. I think that this book really functions as a point of inspiration and a jumping off point. And if you're planning to go to Rome, for instance, and you want to try some of the things that he liked, I don't think he would say, here's a list of things, you have to do all of them, you have to have the experience that I had. It's just, here's the things that I liked, and these are the specific restaurants, and there are many others in Rome that might be great. So it depends on the location too. I mean, a place like Paris, he was very adamant about sit, have a coffee, watch people, take a nap, drink wine if you drink wine. I think he says, have sex if you can, eat something. Of course, obviously there are other places where, there is an adventure to be had, and you do have to make an effort, and you do have to get yourself up and out and see the thing, whatever that thing is. You're up in the mountains of Bhutan, or taking a train across Sri Lanka, or any number of places where there is an adventure to be had, but that's not everywhere. And I think it's important to understand before you go, what does this place want to tell me? How am I going to be happiest? How am I going to feel that I've learned something and changed a little bit and maybe relaxed a little bit, when I go on this trip?
I want to circle back to something that you mentioned when you were talking about Tony's approach to recommending how people experience travel. You said that, it's not necessarily about going to the exact precise place that he went to or that he's going to tell you to go to. And you and I were talking the other day about this phenomenon that people called the Bourdain effect. And you pointed out very correctly that like he did not create it. And it's probably, this is me editorializing, unfair to put his name on it, since these things have existed for ages. The phenomenon of somebody whose opinion is respected saying like, this is the place I went, and then everybody who's listening sort of mishears that as this is the only place to go, or this is the place that is the best, or this is the one that's worth your time. The phrase that I like to use is one that I borrowed from Reddit, the online community, where they if they post a link to like a small website and so many people visit it that they crash it, they call it the hug of death, which I think really encapsulates this phenomenon, because it is like a desire to walk where they walked, to have the same sensory experiences as your heroes, or to just have a sensory experience that you've been told is wonderful. But part of what makes it wonderful for whoever is in that first group, when it's, not a huge international phenomenon, when it's not appearing on a big TV show or in a major magazine, is often the intimacy of it, is the feeling of it being not a secret, but of it being, I don't know, human scale. And it can blow up to much greater than human scale very quickly. And I'm curious how you and Tony, when you were first thinking about this book, how you squared that with the idea of a guidebook, which to me feels sort of like the opposite of that. It is literally a list of places to go.
It is, yeah. And it's also kind of a historical document. I mean, these are places that he went with his show primarily, and his impressions of them at that time. And of course, the minute you drive the car off the lot, it loses value. The minute, the cameras shut off, and then later it appears on television, the restaurant or the bar or the hotel, whatever it is, has moved forward in time. People come and go. So it's a leap of faith, and there's an understanding that it may not be exactly the same as it was, and the internet sort of has changed the whole meaning of travel guide. So this is a sort of a throwback project in a way, but I think a worthwhile one because it's got Tony's unique imprint on it. But tell me again your question. I talk myself right out the door.
Thinking about sort of squaring the idea of liberating people from the oppressiveness of, well, this is the place where, Tony got kebabs in Lebanon, so this is the place where I'm gonna go to get kebabs in Lebanon, versus the much more, I think, holistically, universally approachable perspective of it's not about this specific stand, it's about going somewhere, having a certain degree of eyes openness, ears openness, heart openness, mouth openness, and just kind of recreating the feelings, not recreating step by step the choreography.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say also just to kind of pull it back down to earth, that these places are in the book for a reason, and they were places that he loved. And yeah, when you're in Finland, you should go to Jackson Grilly and get the weird hot dog, after you've had your several hundred beers or whatever, however you spent your previous part of your evening. I think it speaks to the larger point that this book is different things to different people. I think it is a jumping off point. It is, places that he loved, described in his voice, and you absolutely should visit them. It's also a way to visit them with if you are never going to travel again, you can't travel because of COVID or because of your situation in life or whatever it is, you can still learn something, just as you did by watching the shows. You can learn something at a slower pace by reading what Tony had to say about those places. I know for me, I'll get, for instance, the estimable New Yorker magazine, and I will always read the entertainment listings. And will I go to any of those shows, galleries, opera, symphony performances? Mostly no, 1 out of 1,000 maybe, but I learned something about the culture by knowing what's happening out there. So I think this book also functions in that way. You're never going to go to Tanzania or Mozambique, but you can learn about what kind of chicken and what kind of sauce they're putting on the chicken in the little beach shack that he loved.
Yeah, I think there's such a well-regarded phenomenon of people reading cookbooks cover to cover without any intention of ever cooking from them. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should extend that grace a little bit more to travel guides.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody feels that way, but some of the questions I've gotten since the book published is, why did you put so much in about airports? Mm-hmm. Which is a fair question, and it is quite a bit of real estate in the book, and certainly it's information that you can find online. You don't need to find it here, but I actually think there's a lot to be learned there. I think if you're a careful reader and a curious reader, there's a lot to learn about geopolitics, just to see where, you're start in a country and then see where the flights come from and where they don't come from, and what is the airport called? Oftentimes it's named after some really interesting, important political figure. How old is the airport? When did this place even get an airport? Or, just all of that kind of transportation to me is sort of a secret code about how people live their lives. And I think Tony saw that too, especially in like the show, like The Layover, where it was really a part of the show, how to get from the airport to the place, and is there public transportation, and what is the quality of it, and who uses it, and how hard is it to use, and should you use it as a tourist, and all of that kind of stuff. So you may skip over the airport stuff if you're just reading through to get a straight shot of Tony, and that's totally fine.
I really like the airport stuff, actually. I love that you brought it up because it's one of my favorite things about the book. I think it might be in part too because I really like airports, like as a phenomenon, for all of the reasons that you've said, and there's such weird and often telling encapsulations of not just what a place is, but what a place wants you to think it is, especially airports that largely serve tourists. You can really see the narrative that a place is putting forward, and that gives you something to kind of compare your experience to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It is true that COVID has radically changed our perspective on travel. And, I'm thrilled that this book is #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is such a phenomenal achievement. But it's also kind of extraordinary for me and a little bit of a mindfuck to see a travel guide at a moment where, at least for me, I've spent the last year and a half kind of turning off the idea of travel in my head because otherwise it makes me feel very sad. And I don't know. So, we talked about just sort of people reading the book for like armchair fantasy and, connecting with Tony and learning about the world. But is this something that you hope that, people are going to like throw in their carry-on and take with them all over the world? Like you're going to see Instagrams of people like, holding this up?
I mean, I would love that. That would serve my ego, certainly. And that would be sort of a long tail of wonderful, positive, passive marketing. Yeah, I mean, in as much as anyone takes any physical book with them anywhere anymore, I would very much
point. Yeah.
that people would do that. And I think it's useful in that way. There isn't a, is there an ebook? Now I'm actually not sure if
there must be. I can't imagine there's not.
And there's an audio book. So, I mean, there are more efficient ways to bring this with you. But I still leave room in my carry-on for a book or two. And I think this one is just fun reading, even if you're going to, Columbus, Ohio, but you can read a couple chapters about places that are not Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. There was a really wonderful New York Times feature about you in the book a couple of days ago, last week, sometime in the recent past. And one of the things that one of the few kind of critiques that the writer had about the book was the section on Tokyo. I know we've talked about this a little before, but when I saw that in the article, I kind of had my own little private chuckle about it, because a few years ago when I went to Tokyo for the first time, I reached out to Tony and I was like, and I was going very last minute for like a writing assignment. So the circumstances were really weird and I didn't get the chance to do the like deep planning that many people do before their first ever visit to a place like Japan. And I dropped him a line. I think I texted him and I was like, I'm leaving for Tokyo in 5 hours. What should I do there? And he got back to me and he said, you should get an egg salad sandwich at Lawson's, which is a convenience store. You should go to Rocket Restaurant or Robot Restaurant, which is like a huge tourist. It's like medieval times, but with giant robots. It's like really touristy. And there was one other thing that was also like on top of every sort of touristy like TripAdvisor list. And like, I was staring at my phone just like, really? Like, are you kidding me? Like, these are the things I thought I should, what the hell? And those are the things in the book. I mean, those are, and in this Times piece, the writer was like, like this feels, I wanted more, but like, this is the truth. This is what he wanted. This is what he loved there.
These are the things that he truly loved about Tokyo. I mean, I don't think, and I've said this before, I don't think he was always about, or maybe even ever about obscurity for its own sake and just, trying to compete to be the guy that found the weirdest, most obscure, least accessible thing. Sometimes that's what he did, but that was, if we're being honest, that was the work of his producers, and that was what the show asked for. People really loved that. Tony loved experiencing it, but it wasn't, when he set out to truly enjoy himself, he didn't want to hunt down 10 different sources on different blogs and get into like interfood blog nerd wars and just wanted to have a good time. He wanted to experience something that was pleasurable. When I went to Tokyo with him, we stayed at the Park Hyatt, and which is a huge, I guess, a cliche at this point because of the film. Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of it.
Lost in Translation.
Lost in Translation.
That was the other recommendation. He said, get a drink at the top of the Park Hyatt. And I was just like, Tony, those are the 3 things that are like literally 1, 2, and 3 if you go on TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
Or like the most like USA Today list of what to do in Tokyo.
But that's why he chose to spend his free time. I mean, so we got to Tokyo earlier than the crew because they were driving across the country from Kanazawa with all the equipment. So he's like, well, let's go to dinner. And we got in a cab and went over to Shinjuku and just got out like at, the middle of the neighborhood and went to the first yakitori place that we saw. And it was great. I mean, that's the thing about Tokyo in particular is like not everything, but most of what you find just casually is operating at a really high level, and it's not expensive and it's not exclusive. It's just, it's great, and for us, it's different and exciting. So we had just street level yakitori and some beers. And then we went across the street and had some ramen. And then we walked over to the Golden Guy, which, again, a very, very heavily touristed, very popular with Western visitors. You could say in part because Tony shone a light on it. I mean, I don't know how much people were, Tokyo obviously is a perennial tourist destination and was long before Tony started going there and will always be. It's a fascinating, massive, just incredible city. He loved the Golden Guy because he went to Tokyo in 1998 as the consulting chef for the branch of Leal that opened there. And so that was one of his first experiences in that city, was to go to the Golden Guy and go to the Albatross Bar. And there are these tiny little streets, these little Warren-like streets and little tiny bars that are maybe, 6, 8 people maximum can fit in. And they've each kind of got a personality and it's really cool. And there's really nothing like it in any place else. So, that the evening that we were in Tokyo, he was like, let's go over to the Golden Guy and, go get a drink at the Albatross. And then, later I was on my own and he said, well, there's this toy store, and it was, I forget the name of the toy store, but it's like the very famous big, multi-story toy store. And these were the things that he really thought it was worth me spending my time, not, XYZ, out in the hinterlands ramen place, but these things that truly express the joy that he found in Tokyo. I mean, he was also very upfront about, when he would go on vacation with his family, when he wasn't shooting anything, he wasn't going to, again, some place that was cool and obscure and cutting edge. He was going to some tropical place where he could have a fruity drink and sit by the pool and go to the beach and check out. So, in some ways, I think these are some of the Japan chapter is one of the most pure chapters because it was truly reflective of things that he did when he was visiting with his family, things he told me to do, things that he told you to do. I went to Robot Restaurant. I mean, it's insane. It's truly, and it's quite, it's janky. Like it's really, you can see the seams, you can see the stains on the costumes and you can see all the mechanics of the thing, but it's kind of great. I mean, don't eat the food there. The food's terrible, but the show, the pure weird enthusiasm of the show, I think is really what he loved.
Yeah, I do think that you're absolutely right that there is this fallacy that if something is obscure, it must be better, and
true.
no, and especially I think when like the thing that is obscure is intentionally maintaining its obscurity, or like its illusion of obscurity, in order to try to attract like magnetically those like cool bro points or whatever it might be. But when you travel, do you, I don't know, do you look for, when you do that kind of travel, the sort of cultural transfer travel rather than like beach and book travel, do you look for the soul of a place? Do you think that places have souls that can be found?
I guess so. I think it's, you know, it's a good question, because I don't know that I have traveled in any way. All of the travel that I've done, you know, for the last 10 years has been informed by my work with Tony. Either it was because I was traveling alongside the crew as a guest, or because I was researching this book, you know, so everything has been very tightly focused on following up on places that were on my list, or trying to find new places. I, you know, and then COVID. So I feel like when I get back out in the world, I have to sort of figure out what kind of a traveler I am, you know, without the privilege of researching a travel book with Anthony Bourdain, without the privilege of, you know, traveling alongside this crew that's making television. I don't know, you know, I think it's sort of a new era for everyone. You know, I've always been sort of anti-cruise, and I've never really been on a cruise, but I'm thinking like, well, I don't know, there's got to be a way to do it that doesn't make me want to, you know, hide my room for the entire time. And I don't know, we'll see.
I love that you're coming out of COVID like wanting to be on a cruise.
I mean, really, but
it feels like a million years ago, all those poor folks who were trapped on those nightmare cruise ships. But yeah, no, there is something kind of weirdly appealing about cruises to me, in the same way that I find like all-inclusive resorts appealing. And I think it's that same like nothing, like you can just be.
yes, yeah.
And I guess if you are traveling professionally or semi-professionally, it feels like work, even when it's really joyous and beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think I'm going to ask you one more question before we jump into some audience stuff, because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Appetites, which is the cookbook that you and Tony co-wrote that came out now, what is it, 4 or 5 years ago? It's been quite a while. And Appetites was a really big departure, I think, for Tony, and for especially kind of given the place his public persona was when the book came out. He was like probably like at the pinnacle of his extraordinary celebrity, and he was in many ways like every American's ambassador to the world, and vice versa. And the book that the two of you co-wrote and that, you know, you handed to the world was incredibly intimate, and literally a domestic book. It was a book about cooking at home for his daughter, for his family. And that was so inward. And then much of your work with him in other capacities, working on the show, putting together this guide, all of that is so outward. It's sort of Tony seeing the world outside of his home, and this was turning in. And I'd love to know sort of what that was like for you as a person who sort of observed him and the arc of his celebrity and his relationship to it. When the two of you were working on Appetites together, did it feel different? Did it feel strange, hard, good?
Well, it was our first real collaboration. You know, I had worked with him on the Leal cookbook, which came out in 2004, but that was a much more limited role of editing and testing the recipes. So this was the first time that it was, you know, I had a much bigger role in making the book. You know, I mean, you've put this really heady analysis on it, and I think you're correct, but I don't know that I was really aware of the inwardness of it while we were doing it. You know, I was just kind of like, we have a deadline, and we have to develop these recipes, and Tony's he's in South Korea, okay, now he's in Cambodia, like, you know, to me it was about like the logistical challenges, but you know, in retrospect now, I think it was a way for him to continue to tell a story about himself in a way that's, like you said, is probably as intimate in some ways as Kitchen Confidential. And it was sort of the next logical step after he wrote Kitchen Confidential. He did some sort of travel associated books, and then Medium Raw, the essay collection that was a follow-up Kitchen Confidential, and then the cookbook was a way to continue to tell stories, but also in a serviceable way, you know, in a way that didn't require him to sit down and do the kind of writing that it requires to create an essay collection or another memoir, but to still really share. Again, it's like all these little codes, you know, it's like reading about airports, you learn about a place. Reading about what a person cooks for their family, you learn a lot about what they value, where they've been, you know, what's interesting to them, what makes them happy. So yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's in its own way a very intimate portrait. I'm so, you know, grateful that we have it. I mean, the access that we had to him, to his imagination. I mean, the weirdness of the art direction. And, you know, his family's involved in the photos and family friends. And it's a really beautiful time capsule, if I do say so myself.
That's true. And it is true that you get such a look at the intimate detail of places and people through those kind of indirect windows. I was thinking that I've known you for a very long time, and I feel like I learned so much about you reading your Grub Street Diet last week, which I've always, I once, like early in my career, I was in charge of the Grub Street Diet. It was my job to transcribe them on the phone for people. I understand that now you're allowed to like write them down and send them in, but I used to have to get on the phone with that week's like celebrity or cool person and like on Thursday night, like sit there frantically typing with the phone on my ear and then publish it Friday morning. And like, I'm so jealous that you did it, but I also love like getting to see you, and I learned so much about you. Like, I feel like we're better friends now because I know about like, you know, when you eat coffee or what you get cranky about.
That stomach. People were upset about how much Pepto. It was a specific week where I was really hitting the Pepto hard, and you know, just I don't. It's not a regular thing, but it was, that week was a heavy Pepto week.
It was inspiring. It was truly beautiful. Well, okay, we're going to turn to some audience questions. And you folks sent in a ton of really, really wonderful questions, and we're not going to have time to get to all of them. And I've actually tried to condense some similar ones together so that you can all feel seen and loved. But if we don't get to something really important that you want answered, I don't know, come to another event, ask Laurie another question later on, buy another copy of the book.
DM.
So one question that a number of folks sent in was to ask, are there any ways in which Tony influenced you that might surprise us? And I want to add to that, are there any ways that you influenced him?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I touched on it earlier, I think, in talking about Vietnam, you know, that sort of pushing the boundaries of what I was comfortable with. You know, it seems like a small thing. And, you know, I'm sure, again, a lot of people that are listening now have done quite a bit of traveling, and maybe getting on the back of a scooter doesn't seem like a big deal. But I was incredibly like physically cautious and really nervous, and thinking like, this is you know, like I'm gonna get on I have a child back home, you know, halfway across the world. And, you know, just so that kind of thing where it was like, we'll just try it, you know, like just see how it feels. You know, we're just gonna get on the scooter and we're gonna go down the road. And, you know, if you hate it, we'll circle back and I'll drop you off, you know. And I think that could sort of be applied broadly across, you know, the whole spectrum of the, you know, the time I worked for him and the work that I did for him, you know, just him setting this example. And it certainly was not my personal example, but I think I hear this from a lot of people, the example of just of doing the thing. You know, he had this desire to be a writer inside him, and he did it. And you know, he wasn't going to wait until he had the right, you know, whatever, that he retired from being a chef, or that he had the money, or that he had, because that's never going to happen, you know. And he certainly wasn't the only one to give that kind of advice, or to create that kind of example. But for me, it was inspiring every day to see somebody who had, you know, multiple creative urges and just went for it, you know. And also this way in which he was very good at understanding his own limits in terms of what the absolute end of what he could do and what he needed help with, and pulling in great people and trusting them and knowing that, you know, if he trusted them enough to hire them, to have them be part of his crew in whatever way that was, he had to at some point trust that they were going to do what he wanted them to do, and that he was also really good about giving credit to people. And I you know, that's not always the case with somebody in his position. He was very generous about acknowledging the hard work of other people. I mean, you know, you don't make a television show in a vacuum. To some extent, you know, you write, book writing is more of a solitary affair, but it's not entirely. I mean, there's, you know, any creative endeavor that's made for mass consumption, there are always a lot of really talented people that go into it. And he really set the example of thanking people, acknowledging them publicly, trying to give them opportunities to rise up and to grow and to do their own, you know, good work. So it's ways that I influenced him. I don't know. I mean, he was not somebody that was particularly susceptible to the influence of others. I don't know. I'm not sure I can take any credit for that. You know, I mean, I think he respected me, and I think, you know, there were times when he would ask for my opinion. I always took it really seriously, and you know, but you know, he was in charge.
I love this question, and I love the person who asked it for asking this. Do you have any advice for aspiring storytellers who want to do this kind of looking at the world type storytelling?
I mean, at the risk of being very simplistic, I would go back to my previous answer and just say, figure out a way to make time to do it, to write your story, you know, to work on your craft. I mean, this is advice that I ignored for probably 20 years or more. You know, I was like, well, I want to be a writer, and I am a writer, but I really, unless I had a deadline and a contract, or, you know, somebody that was going to pay me money and was definitely going to publish my work, I really didn't spend much time just working on my writing. And that's still very hard for me. I mean, it's, you know, you have to make a living, right? But I've been really lucky in these past few years to have been forced into a writing life and a writing, you know, I have to sit down and write every day because I have a deadline for a book or a story or whatever it is. And I think I used to think of it as a burden and as something that was a torture. And I've been able to kind of find the joy in it, you know, even if it's 25 minutes and I've written, you know, a couple hundred words and maybe they're terrible and there's 10 that I want to keep, that's something, you know. You know, I think everybody's got their own path. I mean, I wouldn't recommend my path. You know, I've taken a really long time. I'm not a spring chicken, and I've spent a lot of time, you know, doing stuff that was not that rewarding. But that's the path that I found myself on. I think, you know, whatever it is, however you can arrange your life and simplify your life to give yourself the time and space to do the writing or the filmmaking or the photography or you know, whatever it is that's your version of telling your story. I think it's really important to do that. I wasted a lot of time drinking to excess and smoking a lot of pot, and I don't do those things anymore. That's not everybody's journey, or that's not everybody needs to do that. But I, over the years, would hear other people who I really admired who had talked about that they had to make that choice for themselves. And that was when they got really serious about their work. So that is absolutely an individual choice for every person. But for me personally, I would not have been able to finish a book if I had still been, you know, using substances the way that I had. So.
Good tip. Sorry, that was the dumbest thing in the world for me to say. I wanted to no, but I think that's true, and it's a I think when someone needs to hear that, that's important to hear.
Again, very individual, but some people probably could benefit from that.
Well, we are just at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to do one final question, and then we can throw it back to Sari and wrap up and say goodbye. But one last audience question, which is, many people want to be the next Anthony Bourdain. Do you think that's possible? And if not, what do you think they should focus on instead?
Short answer, no, it's not possible. There is no next Anthony Bourdain, and you know, it's a very, very common desire. I mean, you know, from the outside, I mean, it looks like the ideal situation. But I mean, the thing that made him who he was the combination of factors that makes anybody who they are. You know, I mean, it would be like somebody saying they want to be the next Helen Rosner, the next Laurie Woolever. Like, you can't, you know, I mean, everything that you grow up with and that you experience and who you are informs what you put out in the world. I think there can be, you know, great travel storytellers, great travel television hosts, mystery writers, you know, memoirists. I mean, there is so much room in the world, especially now with all the platforms that we have. Anyone that wants to dedicate themselves to telling a story absolutely can. But I think anyone that tries to make work that's overtly trying to be in the mold of Anthony Bourdain is on a fool's errand, because, you know, there's only one. So I don't know if that's what people want to hear, but it's true. And from like uncomfortably shortly after he died, people started coming out of the woodwork, you know, trying to be that guy, you know. And I guess, like, points for trying, but you know, I'd say, like, maybe just be yourself. You know, everyone's got their own voice, and to try and imitate his, I think is it's always going to be second best.
Yeah. I mean, the silver lining is that nobody else can be you, right? So, like, sure, you can't be Tony, but he couldn't be you. So, you know, work with what you got.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Laurie, thank you so much for taking this time with me today and with everybody here. The book is amazing. Congratulations. I love reading through it. I can't wait to get on a plane again, though it is a little too heavy, I think, for me to bring along. Maybe I'll get the ebook too. But thank you, everyone, for coming. I think we throw it back to Sari and she'll say goodnight, or I don't know how this works.
Thanks, Helen. Wow, this was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Laurie, thank you for sharing your memories. And this was just so generous. And, you know, it obviously sucks to not have Tony here, but this was really, you know, something of a balm. So I really appreciate it. I know a lot of people asked in the questions, they wanted to know, Laurie, where's the first place that you're going to travel to once the pandemic is over, or once it feels safe? But I would actually just, you know, lightning round, love to know where you want to go, and also, Helen, where you want to go.
I'd like to go back to Rome. I went there just for 4 days shortly before the pandemic, and I was very, very focused, and I was really just trying to, like, do my last bits of research for this book. And as glorious as it was exhausting and way too short a time. And I want to go back and just sort of relax and you know, eat all the pasta and you know, take a bunch of naps and once it's safe to do so.
I really want to go to Japan. When I went on that trip that Tony gave me disappointing but actually fantastic advice for, I went by myself, and my husband was very mad because he'd never been and he always wanted to go. And yeah, I can't wait to go and show him everything that I saw.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to go to both of those places as well.
Let's all go.
Everyone here tonight. Thank you all so much for coming. This is an amazing book. I will follow up to everyone who bought a ticket tonight and send you Laurie's Grub Street Diet, which is so much fun to read, and all the different ways you can stay in touch with Laurie and Helen, and of course buy the book if you have not yet. And you can sign up for our newsletter as well. So thank you, everyone. Take good care of yourself and hope to see you soon. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.